겁나 크다.
첫 번째 게임은 무궁꽃이 피었습니다.
Imagine a place where the marginalized are swept from the streets, promised refuge, and instead plunged into a living nightmare. A place where every day is a test of survival and where death isn't just a possibility, it's an inevitability. This isn't the deadly arena of Squid Game. This was the brothers' home in 1980 South Korea, a real-life dystopia whose horrors rival the darkest of fictions. While Squid Game captures the desperation of debt-ridden contestants battling for survival in rigged, sadistic games, the brothers' home preyed on a different kind of victim. These weren't people who signed up to play a game. They were dragged into it. The homeless, the disabled, children orphaned by war, and anyone deemed undesirable by society became pawns in a system designed to exploit and destroy them. The origins of the brothers' home. The facility was founded in 1975 in Busan, South Korea, under the leadership of Park In-gun, a man who styled himself as a philanthropist but whose actions proved otherwise. The South Korean government, then under military rule, had implemented policies to cleanse cities of vagrants in preparation for global events like the 1986 Asian Games and the 1988 Olympics. Thousands of people, some homeless, others merely in the wrong place at the wrong time, were rounded up by police and sent to places like the brothers' home without trial or due process. Once inside, these detainees were stripped of their rights, their identities, and often their lives. Officially, the brothers' home was a welfare center meant to rehabilitate and shelter the less fortunate. In reality, it was a prison and a labor camp where suffering was currency and death was routine. A system of exploitation and abuse. The parallels to Squid Game become chillingly clear when examining life inside the brothers' home. Just as contestants in the show are reduced to numbers, detainees were treated as less than human. Over 38,000 people passed through the facility during its operation, subjected to horrifying conditions designed to break them. Forced labor. Inmates were compelled to work long hours in grueling conditions, manufacturing products such as bricks, clothing, and shoes. These items were sold for profit, but the detainees saw none of the proceeds. Physical and sexual abuse. Guards routinely beat detainees into submission, and reports of sexual assault were widespread. Children were especially vulnerable, and many were scarred for life by the atrocities they endured. Food was scarce, and medical care was non-existent. Malnourishment and untreated injuries were rampant, leading to at least 657 confirmed deaths, though the true number is suspected to be much higher. Like the games in Squid Game, the system at the brothers' home was designed to dehumanize and crush those trapped within it. Every rule favored the oppressors, and any resistance was met with swift and brutal punishment. The brothers' home operated with near-total impunity for over a decade, shielded by government support and public indifference. It wasn't until 1987 that the truth began to surface. A prosecutor named Kim Yong-won initiated an investigation, uncovering evidence of forced detentions, human rights abuses, and the mass exploitation of labor. Despite the shocking revelations, justice was elusive. Park In-gun, the man responsible for the facility, received only a short prison sentence. The survivors, meanwhile, were left to grapple with the trauma of their experiences. For decades, their voices were ignored, and the full scale of the atrocities remained hidden. It wasn't until 2022, over 30 years later, that South Korea's Truth and Reconciliation Commission officially acknowledged the state's role in the brothers' home tragedy. Survivors were given a platform to share their stories, but for many, the wounds were too deep to heal. The parallels to Squid Game. Both Squid Game and the brothers' home reveal a horrifying truth. Systems built on exploitation thrive when society turns a blind eye. In the show, the contestants are drawn in by their desperation, willingly competing in games that pit them against each other. At the brothers' home, the victims had no choice. They were abducted, imprisoned, and subjected to horrors beyond imagination. Yet the end result was the same: lives reduced to commodities, suffering turned into profit, and humanity stripped away in the name of power and greed. A dark legacy. The brothers' home stands as one of the darkest chapters in South Korean history, a stark reminder of what happens when the most vulnerable are abandoned. Its victims didn't play games to survive. They endured unimaginable cruelty just to exist. And like Squid Game, its story forces us to confront the systems that perpetuate inequality, exploitation, and violence.